Today on Game of Attention, we're talking about AI and content. It's a massive conversation that's happening across all industries. There are 73% of B2B and B2C marketing execs integrating AI tools currently, and the AI application in marketing is projected at 107.5 billion by 2028. So we're talking big numbers, we're talking massive. There's fear for jobs, there's concern over losing the human touch. And today, to discuss it, we've got Andrew and Konrad. Konrad, if you could introduce yourself, that would be great.
Yeah, sure. Well, thanks for having me, first of all. So, I'm Konrad. I am the CEO of The Creative Copywriter. You can probably guess what we do by the name, but I'll give you the spiel nonetheless. So, we blend the science of data-driven strategy and psychology with the art of creative copywriting, basically to help brands get their words right at every step of the customer journey. And I run that agency with my partner in life and crime, Nitzan, who's the managing director. She's my managing director and the managing director of the agency. And yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
Cool. I'm Andrew. I don't have any kind of nice agency or anything. I'm just me. I'm a freelance SEO consultant, have been now for around a year. Before that, I've got about 10 years of experience in SEO. I've been SEO manager at various different agencies. I've worked in-house as well for a few different companies. And yeah, I'm very interested in this conversation we're going to have today because it's already impacting a hell of a lot of what I do day to day. I'm getting lots of questions about this from clients and from different people. So yeah, really happy to get into this today, and thanks for having me.
Great. Thank you both so much for being here. I can't wait to hear what your different insights are on the same topic, but different sides of it. So I'm going to jump straight in with the first question to Konrad, please. How can professionals balance the efficiency and scalability offered by generative AI with the need for high quality, authentic content?
Good question. I think balance is a key word there. I often talk about balance in marketing. I think it's often missed. Even when it comes to copywriting, we have this framework called the 13 lenses, and it's really about ticking all of the boxes and not focusing too heavily on any one box, including SEO, for example. If you're building a content strategy and you're just focused on keywords and just the search engines, you're missing many tricks, which is the fact that we're actually trying to attract humans and engage humans and convince and convert them. I think I can talk about the experience of kind of what we've done as an agency, because I think we're hopefully taking the right approach and trying to sort of educate our clients as well to do something similar. So for us, naturally, as a copywriting agency, we've kept our ears to the ground for we're quite a forward-thinking agency, so we've kind of kept our ears to the ground when it's come to the developments in AI and LLMs, and when GPT itself came out in 2020, and because naturally it does pose a threat to our services, or at least the perception of how it can be used poses a threat to our services. So we kind of wanted to be ahead of the game. And I think the first thing to say is to freelancers and agencies and anyone in the marketing world and field, don't just bury your heads in the sand. I've seen like these two approaches on LinkedIn, people who are like really for it and maybe going too far in that direction, like, oh, we can just use AI and here's a simple prompt and it can generate all your content. And then there's those that are kind of the technophobes that are completely against it. I think that we believe as an agency that the future is collaborative, not just the future, the now is collaborative, and that AI and LLM-based tools like ChatGPT are exactly that. They're a tool to be used to enhance what you're doing, to speed up and improve certain elements of what you do. And so what we did as an agency was we ran a massive use case testing project that's gone on for about a year, and it has to continue, right? Because these things are developing so rapidly. We broke down all of the services that we offer, from a blog post through to writing a homepage, through to running a buyer interview, and kind of everything and anything in between. Put them onto a spreadsheet and broke down each of those services into steps. What do we do to achieve the output of that deliverable? And then we scored how likely we think AI is to improve or speed up that step. And also, perhaps an unusual one, how much do we dislike doing that particular thing? because I think that's really important too. I think that we're, as an agency, at least as a company, it shouldn't just be about efficiency gains, right? I don't want to shave off 10% of time doing a certain task if I'm going to have disgruntled, unhappy copywriters, because that's the bit they love, and they're going to leave me, and I'll end up with, not with a good enthused team. So I think that scoring system like combined both, and then we basically did a lot of use case testing with ChatGPT and other tools like WordTune, Spices, and testing out the strengths and limitations to see how they worked for us. And back to your kind of question, what can people do? I think it's a case of doing your own use case testing, being quite structured as we were, but also having it open. One thing we really had to do is encourage our team to just have ChatGPT open, like just get used to it, right? Because I think a lot of people kind of shut it down. They try one thing and prompt it, and it doesn't get you to where it wants to, and they're like, oh, it's rubbish, right? But the reality is, it's technology. It's a tool that is new and different, and you need to have a bit of patience, because then you can find some brilliant use cases whereby it is trimming out 50% of the time of something that you'd be manually doing and not enjoying previously. We don't believe that ChatGPT can just simply create great content. The way it works is that it's a predictive tool. It kind of works by choosing the most likely next word with some variability there that's likely, based on what it's been trained on, billions of data points out there on the web, and your prompt. So it's prone to cliches, right? It's prone to cliches because, to put it simply, it's learned copywriting from the web, right? What's out there on the web is mostly cliched and average content and copy. So it's most likely to create average copy and content. And what it's likely to also do is miss, as you mentioned, that authenticity, that creativity, that human touch, which I think is going to become more and more important.
Yeah, I think very similar thoughts in terms of processes and using them. And I think the two key words were balance and then authenticity. So, yeah, totally agree. It would be very stupid and naive to just rule out using AI altogether in the processes that we have. I've already seen it to be very, very useful and very helpful in a lot of the things that I do. But it can never be overly relied upon to deliver things like authentic content, because I just don't think it has the capacity to do so at the minute. Scary thought that one day an AI could be authentic and provide more value than a human being, which I don't think is beyond possibility. But yeah, I think at the minute, so just an example, maybe an SEO would be very, very similar to yourself, Conrad, would be maybe delivering content briefs to a writer, for example. Very, very useful to use ChatGPT for that, developing a structure, pulling out, for example, what are the most used headers from the top 10 SERP results for a certain keyword, for example, pulling all that in, and then estimated word count, that kind of thing. That's incredibly efficient, because to do that manually would just be a huge waste of time. But for me, my experience with seeing AI generated content, the written words itself, has been very disappointing, not particularly useful. And the main thing for me is the authenticity. So the big thing with Google's helpful content updates over the last year, well, it's been a series of updates, but it's been all about additional value and adding things that don't already exist out there on the net. And like you said, Conrad, the AI can take things, it can rechurn it, but it's only going to be rewording or repackaging what's already out there. And if what's already out there is not particularly good, it's not going to deliver any extra value. So yeah, I think definitely moving towards that is recognizing that it can be very, very useful and very helpful for us, but never ever forgetting that human element, which in SEO is exactly what Google is going to be looking for, I think, as well, as it responds to the different, the scalability of AI at the minute and the speed of which things have progressed. It looks for the human element even more so.
Yeah, can I just jump on that? I think that a couple of the examples you gave there, Andrew, are exactly the use cases. I was banging on about use cases, and I perhaps didn't mention many of the ones that we found to be useful. But for us, yeah, the research piece, and it is incredible, right? Because historically we've used search as it now stands, and that's changing, and we're obviously going to dive into that, how search is changing. But us as copywriters, as kind of content creators for our clients, we do a lot of our research through search, which in some senses feels a bit antiquated now, doesn't it? Like typing in a term and having to filter through lots of articles written by companies that have had a good SEO budget to
But
try and
it's
find.
also the most underrated, I think, and the most underused is actually just looking at things. We can use a tool and it says the intent of this keyword is this, but actually you go and have a look at the results and it's clearly, very wrong. So yeah, that for me is very underutilized skill in SEO actually.
Yeah. And so for us, research, hugely useful in just feeding and sparring as well when it comes to actually content creation, being a kind of sparring buddy. I personally use it, even for creating LinkedIn content. I probably shouldn't be saying this, but as a sparring partner, right? Like it's my idea. I have the ideas. Usually on a Saturday morning, they come to me and I start. And I've got ADHD, so I'm very good at starting things and not great at finishing things because I want to jump to the next shiny object. But we kind of built a bot called Linkycon. It's a GPT, which will help me flesh out some of those ideas that I've given, and then I'll go back and forth. But very much a sparring partner rather than let's copy and paste the prompt in and expect good results. But research, sparring, and for us transcribing calls when we do customer interviews or stakeholder interviews with clients. It's just we use Fireflies, which rudely sometimes jumps into meetings when I'm even before I've turned up, and it great. It transcribes very well, and then you can find information within that transcript. So that's been so useful for kind of recap emails and more kind of functional content and comms.
Yeah, I have to agree on most of them because obviously with content strategy that I do for Dragonfly, I'm running 8 copywriters, and to do the research and when I'm doing thought leadership pieces, it just cuts that kind of chunky stuff down so much. But also Fireflies, who's just following everyone. Everyone has one now. It's just following everyone. But it's great when they do product meetings and then they can just send me the transcript. So I don't have to sit there and be part of the call. I can just get to it when I have time. And I think it's really important what you've both said about authenticity, because I have this discussion constantly with my manager, and she's like, well, can't we just use ChatGPT for more? And I'm like, for more, yes, but there has to be a balance. It still has to be at the center of it, human to human. I'm not going to put out anything out there that's in the ever-evolving landscape of blah, 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 blah. There's enough of it out there. We don't need more of it. And I'd rather put out less higher quality than more gumph.
Yeah, sometimes in SEO as well that ultimately it's not search engines that are reading what we're putting out and landing on what we're putting out, right? It's another human being with eyes and a working brain. Google's ultimate goal in ranking something is to provide them with the best result, not something which satisfies these dark algorithms that they have that, SEOs have cracked the code of how to get into them, and, it's all a big secret. And if you give Google what it wants, you'll rank. No, it's not. It's very much that if you provide another human being with something that's valuable and useful, you've very much increased your chances of ranking well on Google. So yeah, definitely agree with that. And something that we all really do forget is that every single piece of content we put out, unless it's crap and it never gets indexed, but most things will get read and seen by another human. And when we think about that, it makes it a bit more, well, we should make that as good as it can possibly be. It's not a rush job. It's not about efficiency. It's about making that really helpful for someone. So something we should try and, always remember when we're developing content, I think.
Very easy to get lazy when it's so easy to do it, though. And I think this is what's happening a lot, is that marketing teams, there's always, organic takes long, and, quality content, is it really worth it? Because it takes so much longer to turn around results than, say, paid or events or things that kind of have such a quick turnaround. And so it's easy for them to go, hang on, I'm just going to take that budget from you and go put it over there. So just use ChatGPT to produce the same volume because I just want the volume. And they don't think about the quality.
I think I completely agree with what both of you guys have said. Like one thing that we have been saying for years is, quality over quantity. It might be in my interest to not be saying that, right? Because I run a copywriting agency and we make more money if we write more for our clients. But at the end of the day, we want to get results. And yeah, I think that from both ends of the spectrum, which I guess we're talking about today, in terms of how AI can change how people are creating content and are creating content. But also there's the other end in terms of SGE, right? And how the way people search is changing, especially, Google, at least I know it's been rolling it out in various places, but that's all going to change, isn't it? I think, Angie, you probably know more than me about that. Above the fold, they'll have, is it Bard that will answer queries in the way that ChatGPT answers queries? But even from a personal perspective now, as a sample of one, but as sometimes it's easier to get your head around something when you're doing something in a new way. I now use ChatGPT to answer those more kind of top funnel, simple, basic questions that I used to use the current Google search for, which means that the way that I search for information has changed, and it is changing with a lot of people, and it will change even more once Google kind of rolls it out across the board, which means that, again, the basic SEO content, as I like to call it, the kind of stuff that lots of companies throw lots of budget into, answering simple top funnel questions, you'll now have a new competitor, which is a large language model, right? Because there's so many companies, let's say in an example, sort of QuickBooks, right? They've got so much content out there in terms of what is accountancy and what does an accountant do, and they're real basic, like, question answer stuff that does currently, up until now, has pulled in traffic. But the reality is, it's real basic, it's really simple. And why would you need to visit that website to read through a blog post if you've got like a chatbot answering that question thoroughly in a more interactive and conversational way? So I feel like the in my opinion, when it comes to content marketing, that top funnel part is what will be affected most. And so where does the company's budget go into? I think it's more into mid and bottom funnel content and copy, and also content that, as you said, Andrew, is more valuable, is more opinion based, is perhaps more related to what that company's achieved. Here's a case study of something that we've done that's achieved A, B, and C, that you can't just get with the simple, what is a copywriting agency? What's the difference between copywriting and content writing? Those that I think that focus on what I call basic SEO content will need to go elsewhere. But the essence of marketing is still there, right? There's still brands that will need to cut through the clutter and differentiate and try and reach their target audience. And there are still consumers who need to find services and products. So it's just about trying to navigate how this is going to change, at least search, and that relationship between brand and consumer, and how else can we kind of get through to our target audience. And there are other platforms, social, and creating really high value content assets that you can kind of get in front of people on LinkedIn, or if it's B2C world, through Instagram, etc. So yeah, it's changing, but I think the nature of marketing is still the same. It's just about preparing for what's around the corner, and how these shifts will affect, consumer behavior and so on.
Yeah, the SG, the sort of Bard stuff and stuff like that's interesting, because we've kind of there's been like a soft launch of that for quite a few years now, right? Well, even going back 10 years, I remember speaking to someone who had a website that would scrape weather forecast information, blah, 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 and get a hell of a lot of traffic, and then they sell the advertising space, and the whole thing just collapsed when Google just started showing the snippet of the weather forecast. And we see featured snippets now that answer questions in 3 or 4 sentences. But taking the clicks away is definitely going to be an issue coming forward. But I think Google is going to have to be very careful and very sensitive about this, because then you de-incentivize content creators. You what's the point? You're essentially just feeding content into Google and saying you can have that for yourself, and we don't see the benefit of that essentially. And so Google is and there's been some pushback on this, so they're going to have to try and find that balance between making sure that producing content, that informational content, like you mentioned, Conrad, is still worthwhile because it's still going to have to be there. But then also, I think there's always the implied intent behind those kind of questions. So what is a copywriting agency? Well, maybe you want a copywriting agency, and then maybe you would then want to go and click, and you wouldn't just want that answer really quickly, right? So there's some queries where you just want the answer as quickly as possible. You don't want to go anywhere else. There's some where there's the implied intent behind it that I want additional information beyond that maybe a chatbot or an AI might not be able to provide me. So, and again, that's a huge task for Google, is trying to work out what are those queries that we can show those, what are those that we do need to show a traditional SERP, right, where someone does want to click through on the result. So that's, and I don't think they really know. They've not really sussed that one out just yet. So that's going to be interesting to see how they do that. But yeah, I totally agree. Like the top funnel stuff where you just want an answer as quickly as possible.
Back to the sensitivity of it and Google's business model, right? If Bard is just answering all of those questions, where's it getting those answers from, right? It's learnt from the web. So then if content creators stop creating content because there's no longer ROI for doing so, then it just becomes this black loop of just not learning anything. But yeah, it's kind of hard to get your head around. Don't suddenly take all of your SEO budget and throw it into something else, because SEO is still really, really important and a brilliant way to kind of bring traffic and sales and revenue to a company. But start to think about perhaps how some of your content at least needs to be more value driven, more kind of opinion based, more authentic. For those that are misusing and abusing ChatGPT at that other end in terms of the content creation, it levels the playing field in a way, doesn't it? Let's say we've all got this supercomputer that can create content for us, then how do you differentiate, right? Then if all competitors can churn out 1,000 pieces of value-driven content at the same speed, what can you do to differentiate? And I think that differentiation has always been a key part of marketing, a key crucial ingredient, and perhaps it's going to be even more important. And back to authenticity, that's going to be even more important.
The game hasn't changed. Low quality content is still the enemy that we're fighting against, right? It's just that the speed and the scale of AI in the past 2 or 3 years has probably just caught people off guard. I think it was always happening. It was always being used. I've seen AI produce content for 6-7 years minimum. It's got a lot better, a lot quicker. So I think everyone was just a bit surprised by that. But still, the same people were churning out low quality content 10-15 years ago with 2-cent a word copywriters outsourced from abroad and stuff like that. So it was always there. They were always pumping out huge amounts of bad content. Just they do it a lot quicker and a lot easier now, I think.
I'm sure, like, as time goes on, and it is happening already, that panic is kind of dying down, and we're seeing how we can work collaboratively with AI as opposed to just bowing down to it. Both very good points, and it brings me quite nicely to my second question, which, Andrew, I'd like to ask you. How can copywriters, SEO consultants, and brands collaborate effectively to leverage Gen AI in creating content that's both engaging and optimized for search engines?
Well, it's hard because I think we're all still working out how we do use this effectively and what the boundaries are, I guess, in using it. And I don't think there's any consensus yet on how much we do use this, or to what extent do we edit a piece of content, for example, that might have been produced using AI, or at least the basic structure and outline of it was. How far do we go with it? How far do we trust the AI? I don't think any of us really have come to that kind of consensus yet. So it's very much a work in progress. But I think for me, I try and set those out quite soon on, maybe taking on a new client or working with an in-house team, for example, at an agency, trying to find out exactly what their processes are for using AI in the beginning. what mine are, and then trying to set those out in the beginning so everyone's clear on how we use it, how it forms part of our, more manual human processes as well.
It's something that we aim to do with this is prior to AI, right? Like having the right discussions with our clients to understand their goals, their needs, their capabilities, if we were doing a full content strategy with a client, we've got a series of workshops, and the first one's is called Your Journey, and we do like a SWOT analysis. So again, understanding strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. And nowadays, we're probably discussing AI in both opportunities and threats, right? It's coming up into the discussions, and also in various other workshops of ours, we've got these kind of kind of templated sort of slides that we use, that we take clients through depending on what their needs are. We've just added AI into certain ones because it's just a consideration now. So when looking at content formats, which is one of our kind of mini workshops, when we're discussing what kind of formats they can leverage, repurposing being a nice word that I like to talk about in content strategy because it just makes a lot of sense to repurpose content. How can we use AI? I think that repurposing is one where we're starting to see like perhaps what I would call a game changer for us as an agency creating content, because arguably you can kind of create some really valuable, opinion-based, authentic content, let's say a high-value lead magnet, a report or something, and that's come not just from the web. It's not just come from AI picking out some cliched stuff. It's come from you, written brilliantly. Like you said, Andrew, understanding how they're using AI. With us, probably the same as you, Andrew, we've got a stance on it. One of the things we had to do when ChatGPT woke the world up to the kind of how advanced AI is, and the fact that, part of the kind of genius of ChatGPT was that it's a free tool, right? So everyone just got stuck in. There was already Jasper, which was Jarvis previously, and copywriting tools using GPT, but ChatGPT kind of woke the world up to the advancements. And I think that we had to develop our stance, our philosophy, our kind of quite quickly be vocal about it on LinkedIn and say, look, we believe it's collaborative. This is what we're doing. And that's helped us as an agency to kind of bring in some business and have conversations with our clients that might be confused or fearful or a little behind the times.
What are the like resistance or like specific concerns that your clients often express? Because I've found, not obviously external because I'm in-house, but from other stakeholders, there is resistance to
resistance to using AI or to not.
I mean, mine's the opposite because we're an AI company, so I get them going, use more AI, and I'm like, no, human. But I suspect for you, it's the other way around.
You know what? It is both. It's both. It's interesting because we went through that period in like November 2022, was it, where all of a sudden, and my wife, she's on TikTok a lot, and there was suddenly like, fear mongering, the death of copywriting, the death of this. We went through that whole period and we were like, shit, we need to like get our stance on this. And there's also been an economic crisis, right? So like that has affected our pipeline and it's affected things. And sometimes we've been keep trying to understand, it has ChatGPT affected the amount of work that's been coming in our pipeline and the appetite for a copywriting agency. A lot of the companies we work with are global companies, like larger kind of enterprise companies that tend to be a little bit behind the times when it comes to emerging technology. So for quite a few of them, there's not even been any talk of it really, which is interesting. If anything, it's been us trying to preempt it. But when we have had any new prospects kind of raising the issue of, AI generated content and copy, it's been on both ends of the spectrum. We've occasionally had people saying, we're looking for human copywriting, literally like a request in through the agency website saying, we're looking for human only copywriting. So that's obviously, I guess they've been burnt, or they know that whatever circles they've been in, they've seen a lot of the kind of crappy cliched AI generated stuff. But I won't lie, there has been, I can think of one instance specifically. This is one of our kind of enterprise companies where, again, and I think I mentioned it before, there was someone who comes from more of a like SaaS scale up background, growth hacker sort of person that was like, well, look, we can do this. Just one individual, but the marketers were kind of on our side going, because they saw the quality of it, right? Coming back to it being a tool, there was this really good comment on one of my LinkedIn posts, and I remember it almost word for word. They said, the best way to write great copy with AI is by being a great copywriter. Otherwise, garbage in, garbage out. And I thought that was just a beautiful way of sort of summarizing it, because, in that particular instance, we had someone who's not a copywriting expert just going, oh, write me some copy. And so they didn't know how to prompt it well. They didn't know how to edit it. They didn't know how to achieve what they needed to achieve, because they're not an expert in the art and science of copywriting and all the boxes you should be ticking to what we're doing as an agency. Like, it's both interesting, exciting, worrying at times, but we're trying to do the best we can, which is, like I said, stay ahead of the curve and really keep on top of things.
Yeah, I've seen both extremes as well. So I've actually lost a client because they were convinced that they could do everything using AI. And I've then won a client who left their existing agency because of their overuse of AI and their insistence that everything was done that way. So I think, yeah, and probably right that it was the marketing manager who made that call to leave the agency and inquired with me. And it was a sales director who made the call the other way, who said, let's do everything with AI. So, yeah, I think that's really interesting. It sort of mirrors exactly that, is that, yeah, whatever mindset and approach you have in marketing is probably very much going to influence your opinion and your approach to AI.
I found it quite interesting in recruiting because I lean on copywriting freelancers a lot. And I found in recruiting, when you set them a test task, I don't even need to put that through an AI checker. I know that you've just taken chunks from ChatGPT and you're trying to pass it off as your own work. And I just think that there are, from the copywriter side, there are so many of them that are probably getting away with it, that are probably just, sending out a load of nonsense because they only charge $10 an hour or whatever. And they're coining it because ChatGPT is doing it in a few minutes and they're coining it. And there's enough rubbish on the internet to support that theory.
I think everyone will learn what the red flags are and the signs to look out for eventually. Even, in the sales directors will very quickly get to recognize that. I think we just probably need to give it time, right, until this is more embedded in what we do online. But I think ultimately, yeah, it's going to, but then of course the AI always evolves. So then what is an AI piece? It's going to learn how to not look like a piece of AI generated content, essentially, right? So it's going to evolve in that way. So it's always going to be an ongoing battle. But yeah, I think the majority of people who work in digital marketing, if you put an AI generated piece of content in front of them, I think they could spot it a mile off. But yeah, it just takes time for us to see what those sort of patterns and templates look like.
But I think also there's always been crappy marketing, right? And a lot of it, and there's always been marketers making kind of crappy decisions. So they will continue to do so with AI in a sense. And you mentioned it before, Andrew. You could always farm out your content and get pay sort of 1p per word or something like that, and or go to content mills, and loads of companies have been relying on them to various degrees of success, I guess. As a copywriting agency, I'll be honest, we've always been battling that other copywriting agencies, but also marketers and non-marketers who think they can write copy because they know English, right? And they have maybe an English degree or something else. And so, they're like, oh, yeah, well, we'll write it, right? Or consultants who they know the subject matter, or so they think they can write good copy for their website. So for us, at least, we've always been having to sort of fight for the value of really, really good copy and content. And this just adds a whole level, an extra wave and an extra level to it.
The influx of AI generated content, how do you think it's going to affect search engine algorithms and ranking strategies?
Well, it's already affected it. So we've had, like I said, the helpful content update, for example, over the last year that's been rolling out a little bit longer, actually, is not a Google hasn't said this is a response directly to AI, but it's pretty obvious that it is the scale of it. But the wording of all the documentation is very clear to make it clear that AI isn't necessarily the enemy, that AI generated content is not banned per se. It's just that it has to be better than what's already out there to rank, which has always been the case anyway. So the fundamentals of that have not changed. So the algorithms are only really responding, I think, to the scale and the speed of how much content has been produced, maybe since these tools have become free and more usable. And then the second thing I would say is that it's more important now for brands and for content producers to be more selective and be a bit more clever about the content they're putting out, quality over quantity again, because it's just going to get lumped in with all of that AI produced content, which is like just SEO landfill at the minute. It's just filling up, and you don't want to get lumped in with that.
So what you're saying, Andrew, is they should come to a copywriting agency like us?
Absolutely not. No, they should work with an experienced SEO consultant.
Or both.
Or both, ideally. Yeah, we can't do everything. So, yeah.
I think it's been really interesting having like both sides, agency and freelancer, and also SEO and copywriting come together. Thank you both for your time. The lessons are obviously balance, using it as a tool, and collaborating and remembering the human at the center. Thanks so much for your insights.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for having us.